The Core and the King is one of the most poignant and haunting episodes of the show, and I am glad that the show is finally back on track and delivering some of the most interesting and compelling storytelling it's given us thus far. The episode details these strong bonds, playful, compassionate, and trusting, between Andrias, then the crown prince of Newtopia, Barbauld, and Leif, and how those bonds are tested by a dark, devastating secret about what is coming for Amphibia, and eventually leads to Leif making the decision to take the music box from Andrias to save Amphibia, leaving Andrias betrayed and resentful, and with a mix of feelings that he still has not gotten over to this day. Ruminates on his friend's past hopes for him and for Newtopia, how those hopes soured, and how he still misses his friends, though he stopped being their friends a long time ago. That is a lot to try to pack into a measly 11-minute episode, especially when one also considers that the episode deals with Darcy, who has not had a lot of screen time before this point, since Marcy was formerly possessed by the Core in Olivia and Yunnan. Darcy retains Marcy's eccentric, dorky mannerisms, still loving all the foods that Marcy loves, still being clumsy, and still retaining Marcy's general upbeat attitude toward life, even though Darcy is callous and vindictive and manipulative. Honestly, I think this makes Darcy significantly scarier and more unnerving. There are plenty of maniacal, calculating villains out there, but the proximity of Darcy's behavior toward the behavior of Marcy, whom we all love and care about, feels particularly perverse, and it inches very close to the Freudian uncanny. It's almost Marcy, but everything sweet and life-affirming and thoughtful and empathetic about Marcy is gone, replaced with the desires of the Core, Andrias' father included, and the Core only, it appears, has plans to conquer and dominate the Earth and all other universes. So yes, that is a lot to fit into such a small episode. Considering how the episode directly before this, The Root of Evil, was charming but rather silly and extraneous, I think most people would probably agree that the season would have been better served had that episode been removed and this made into a 22-minute episode. Even then, it still would have felt a little fast-paced, and there would not have been enough time to really linger on these moments of contemplation and anxiety and emotional devastation that are the beats this episode is crying out to have. But it still would have been better than what we're presented with, which is more of a sketch and adumbration of Andrias' backstory than a full exploration of it, a la The Avatar and the Fire Lord, which remains the gold standard for somber backstory episodes involving the falling out of close friendships over conflicting ideals and values. The episode we're given here has all the elements one wants from an Andrias backstory episode and everything that has been set up, and it is all delivered quite well and quite efficiently. We have the central friendship between these three, and especially between Leif and Andrias. They are the two primary characters of this episode. Beryl, while important to some degree, and present enough that you feel he's part of the friend group, is not the focus of this episode. Leif and Andrias are close. Andrias even appears to have a bit of a crush on her. Leif sends Andrias secret messages that only he can read. And she's quite adorable and charming. She's also a planter, as evidenced by how she performs the absurd planter dance that is passed down through the generations to Hop Hop. Somehow it looks significantly less silly when Leif does it. Obviously it still looks silly, but there's a certain kind of organic expressivity to it that fits Leif's bubbly personality quite well. Leif is idealistic. She wants Andrias to use his powers as the crown prince and to become the king for good. But she's still, one must consider, okay with Andrias and his dynasty conquering these different worlds to use them for resource exploitation to fuel the prosperity of Newtopia's empire. Or at least she's able to tolerate what Newtopia does enough to still be so close with Andrias. I love these little playful moments between Leif and Andrias at the beginning. Most of the episode does feel a little perfunctory. Like, this is all information we need to know, and I love that it's structured in such a way that we see both why Leif betrayed Andrias, and we understand how hurt and resentful Andrias is of that betrayal, and one sympathizes with him to some degree. And yet, the episode feels like it could always use a little more life, a little more color, a little more fleshing out of these characters and their situations. There's not a moment where characters can really stop and reflect and consider on what has happened to them or what they're about to do. Amphibia doesn't have a lot of moments like this, and I think the show is worse for it. But there are a few, such as when Sasha is given space to reflect on how dissatisfied she feels in the middle of True Colors. Or when we get that bit of Marcy at the beginning of True Colors, and it's just her anguish and anxiety that drives her to steal the music box. We could use a little bit of that emotional nuance and emotional fleshing out in this episode. Still, the efficiency of this episode is impressive. There's not a wasted shot or a wasted line here. The three of them are still goofing off and playing and still being the dorks they are until Leif discovers through the music box that a terrible calamity is going to befall Amphibia. Perhaps that's why it's called the Calamity Box. A thought that is just occurring to me as I'm recording this and is not in my notes. But Andrias is skeptical a little bit. He understands her passion for wanting to not keep invading worlds. He understands her strife and her struggle, but he also has responsibilities. He also has to consider the burden his father, Aldrich, places on him. Andrias is going to be the new king of Newtopia very soon, in the context of this episode. His father is trying to teach him how to rule, and Andrias is obviously unprepared, and he does not understand the responsibilities of leadership. His father is not a kind or moral king, but he is nonetheless a pragmatic one who understands where Newtopia's power comes from and how the music box is essential to maintaining that power. Abandon the music box and the power it allows Newtopia to have, and the civilization falls into ruins, which is what ends up happening, at least ruins compared to what it was like in the past. We see how advanced Newtopian technology was, with them having all these sophisticated robotics technologies back when Earth was still medieval. And I like how ambivalently the show plays the moment of betrayal. One is obviously wanting to sympathize with Leif, because she is taking away the box that allows Newtopia to have the power to conquer worlds. But one should note that she is doing it for somewhat self-serving reasons. She's less concerned with all the other worlds that Newtopia has exploited and more concerned with what fate will befall Amphibia in the future. Also, after she presents her case and is denied by Aldrich, she is pretty quick to steal the key from Andrias, ignore everything he's been saying, and then steal the box from him with no acknowledgement of the strong friendship that they've had throughout their lives. I can completely understand why Andrias feels so blindsided by this. I can understand where his bitterness and resentment comes from. Andrias very deeply cares for her. He fights for her, even against the wishes of his father. His father considers Leif a traitor and wants her treated accordingly, but Andrias defends her. He supports her. The bond between them is that strong. And while they have their disagreements, and their personalities are obviously very different, Andrias has no reason to believe that she would do something so drastic to him personally and to the Empire of Newtopia. And yet she does, despite how considerate he has been for her. One can certainly understand where all his anger and anguish toward her comes from. And the same with Barbauld, who has the chance to stop her from stealing the box, and yet he doesn't. He becomes conflicted. Andrias thus fails as his father's son, and the shame of his failure never leaves him. He knows that, to a certain extent, his father was right. If he didn't trust Leif, if he wasn't so close to her, then she wouldn't have betrayed him. It is only because he was, after all her proclamations about not liking the direction Newtopia was going in, willing to be close to her and spill all his thoughts and feelings out to her, that he opened himself up to being betrayed by her. I hope the show draws more parallels with this in relation to all the betrayals Anne has suffered and perhaps caused in the past in the show. Anne doesn't know anything about Andrias' backstory, so I wonder what will happen if she learns about it. Still, whatever happens, this is a haunting and beautiful episode for how short it was, and I'm so glad we got an episode like this. The show really needed it. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. What are your thoughts on the Core and the King? Please write them down in the comment section below. Anyway, tune in soon. The next video will be coming soon. Donate to my Patreon to see it before anyone else. Adios, comrades.